Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On the show, we interview other writers and we talk about mental health from their personal journeys. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, go ahead, do that now so that you never miss an episode.
Hi, everybody. How are we today? So as you can maybe tell, I don't know, maybe not. This is one of our recorded episodes, and with us today we have Jason Willis-Lee. How are you today?
I'm good, Randi-lee. Thank you very much for having me. It's very kind of you.
And I know you just told me where you're joining us from, but it's super cool because you are only, I think, the second person to have visited us from there. So where are you visiting us from?
I am visiting you from Madrid, Spain. I'm right in the middle of Spain, here in Western Europe.
That's fantastic. I was supposed to go to Spain 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was supposed to be a school trip. So in grade 12, we did Italy. And then I went back for 12B, and it was going to be a trip to Spain. But then something was going on in Spain at the time, so they canceled the trip. It was, I don't know, they didn't want to take a whole bunch of teenagers
Was
there.
that the 11 terrorist attacks, maybe, 2004?
It could have.
Yeah.
It could have been in and around that
Maybe.
time. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was 11 March
think so.
2004. Biggest terrorist attack we've ever had in Spain. Yeah.
Then yeah, I think that
Sounds like
would
that.
match up time wise, and I think they were saying something about there was bombs or something.
Yeah, there was a high threat back then.
Yeah, so I never got to go, and I still have not got to
Oh,
go
that's
yet.
a shame.
But maybe.
Well,
there's
look
still
me up if you
time.
come over. I'd love to show you around.
Yeah, there's still time, so we'll see. So other than being in Spain right now, tell us a little bit about who Jason is.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a medical translator. I'm a service provider first and foremost. I translate from French and Spanish into English. So I live in my source language country, which is pretty helpful. I also do French, and I do medical translation, so clinical trials, medical reports, technical reports, and research for journals, academic journals. And in the last couple of years, I've diversified into consulting. I do a bit of coaching and consulting on the side. And now I'm trying to get into a space called linguistic validation, which is where you translate all the questionnaires into all the different languages for a clinical trial. And I'm doing this because I think it might be a more affluent space for me to make my home for the next few years. And it may future-proof my career. It's more AI-proof, less sensitive to AI changes and those kind of things that have rocked my industry, many industries, including the writing industry,
Yes.
as you're probably aware. And yeah, I'm having a good time hanging out, going on podcasts. I have my own show, and I go on other people's shows, like your good show here. And it's just fun. It's a fun thing to do. Meet people online and have a chat. And your topic is super interesting, mental health, which is very, very a topic close to my heart. And that's why I applied. That's why I wrote to you. So super happy to be here.
So why is it close to your heart? I mean, I know the answer because I read your questions, but why is it close to your heart?
Well, I guess I've had mental health issues myself, and I was born into a family with these issues. Just coming up to about a year ago, 8 or 9 months ago, I found out my mother was BPD. She was a borderline pathology, a borderline personality person, and that is a complex mix of psychosis and neurosis. My father had APD, which is an antisocial personality, very severe APD. So the combination of those two pathologies, I think we can say they're both psychopathologies, was very harmful. It was very deleterious for me, and I got caught up in that kind of crossfire. I don't have mental illness myself, but I've certainly had emotional stability problems. So, realizing that my mother was BPD sort of forced me to look at my past in a different light and and I'm currently going through some issues from those years, just revisiting them. And I've used therapists, I've used psychiatrists. I was in therapy from 2009 to 2017, pretty much straight through. And the trigger for me was not being able to control my 18-month-year-old baby's emotions back when I was 33, 34. I thought, well, I really need some help with this. No hope of controlling her emotions if I can't control my own. So I got the help and the family is still intact in a few days, coming up to a 20th wedding anniversary, two beautiful daughters, nearly 18 and 15, so that's a good result, I think, for me. But it wasn't an easy ride. It wasn't an easy ride.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more, and obviously only share as much as you're comfortable with.
Sure.
But growing up in a situation like that, especially you said it was only a little bit ago that you knew your mom had that.
Correct.
So growing up, there was, this is just who she is, and is all moms like this because this is my mom, right? How'd that go? How was life?
Yeah, I mean that was an abusive household, so there was pretty bad emotional abuse. There was some physical and sexual abuse as well, I'm sorry to say. So that was thank you. That was 83 to 93. So psychosis, it's a tricky one because there is a mild disconnection from reality. It's not the same as schizophrenia. It is especially a fear of abandonment, and these patients, these profiles are just very, very afraid of being abandoned. And there was a lot of neglect, there was a lot of cruelty, and I'm taking steps to address those issues now. I'm looking for redress as we speak. I gave evidence to police officers at the beginning of this month, the 2nd of March, so literally a few days ago. I found out about the BPD in the middle of last year through a lady I met at an event. I was speaking at an event in Riga, and I spent some time with someone, and I guess the person's emotional patterns were so familiar to me that I was drawn in, and then it took me a few months to work it out, but I wasn't told the person had BPD, but she was certainly borderline. She also had NPD, which is narcissistic personality, and she was neurodivergent, which means either ADHD or or the autism spectrum, and I think she was ADHD. So all of this I worked out by myself. I studied medicine in the early 90s for 4 years, so I have some clinical skills, good enough to make that diagnosis anyway. Even though I got it wrong, I initially thought she was bipolar, which was a mistake. She sounded euphoric on the phone when I spoke to her.
They are very a lot of overlap.
Definitely, and they're commonly confused, BPD and the bipolar. But bipolar is especially a swing between manic depression and high euphoria. So I remember calling her, I think, about a year ago, about the 4th of March, and I felt she was euphoric on the phone. But I quickly realized this person is not at all healthy, and there was push-pull behavior. So, saying one thing, doing another, this terrible push-pull, so you don't know whether you're coming or going with someone like that. So it's a very difficult disorder to deal with. It's very difficult to leave a relationship if you are in a BPD relationship, as my biological father was. So he was in a difficult situation. 1.5% of the population are BPD, mainly in women. It's more prevalent in women than men. And it's just probably the hardest psychopath to deal with. And sadly, she wasn't treated, Randi-lee. She was never given the help she needed. BPD only entered the diagnostic manual, the DSM, in 1980. So her life sort of unraveled, just a couple of years afterwards, 83, 84, and I was 8 or 9. I was, a young child. So yeah, I was in a tough spot back then, and sadly, the other parent wasn't much better. He was slightly healthier than she was, but only slightly. So I was, I got caught up in that, and unfortunately, there was a lot of abuse going around in 1980s England, in my country, and a lot of us, at school, there was some things happening to other people. I mean, my situation was probably down the lower end. There was one boy who was being physically abused. We later found out he was suffering physical abuse by his father. And he would come in, he wouldn't touch anybody, but he was carving into people's emotions, doing severe damage to different people, just moving on from one person to another. He'd be told to lay off somebody, then he'd just lay onto somebody else. So, there was quite a bit of this going around, depending on our parents, and they were baby boomers. My mother was actually 10 and a half years older than my father, so she was born in August 34, and my father was born in March 1945, so he's just turned 80. My mother passed quite a long time ago. complications of diabetes. And I guess another complication, she was a diabetic. BPD people usually have substance addictions, as you're probably aware. She was a binge eater, so her substance addiction was actually sugar, which is not the typical nicotine or alcohol you're probably used to.
But still very bad.
But still very bad for you. So she had a massive DKA, which is a ketoacidosis, in November of '99. She should have died really then. 3 weeks intensive care, and then she had a massive stroke in March of 2000. So she passed 16 months after that. So complications basically of not regulating her sugar, which is diabetes is such a dangerous disease, but so very easy to handle if you are on top of it. And take your oral.
My husband's type 1, and I'm always giving him.
There you go.
Giving it to him, right? Like, are you sugar? Is your sugar?
Yeah.
Why is your thing going beep beep? Because he's got one of the ones that is on the arm. So
a glucometer. Yeah.
Like, why is it beeping? Are you high? Are you low? What's happening?
He's got a sensor. That's the mod. Yeah, one of my best friends is also type 1. So, yeah. we both have experiences there. So, that was kind of my challenge was just getting through, my having children and my family life and the emotional stability problems, the lack of boundaries. I think I would be very disrespectful of people's boundaries, which is a problem, and slightly better today because my awareness of this is much greater. I wouldn't enforce my own boundaries, even when someone comes along I wasn't particularly interested in. I wouldn't enforce my own boundaries, which was a very telling sign. So I guess I've got a handle to an extent on these things, but it's difficult when your boundaries are violated. So early on, I was actually groomed. I was sent money and told to take this woman out for dinner, and total lack of trust and violation, which was as much a crime back then as it is now. Grooming is a very, very serious, any sort of exploitation of vulnerable people like children, as I was at the time. So, as you can imagine, that was a very cathartic experience for me a few weeks ago, and tremendous sense of agency being taken back, tremendous sense of empowerment as I walked away from the meeting, and it took me 11 years to get that meeting. I tried 2 previous attempts to get close to senior officers and tell them my story. It's very difficult because police have current threats. There are people immediately in danger, firearms issues, and when I spoke to a detective sergeant the day previous when we'd arranged the call, he was on a firearms case, and that's just an immediate threat. So, a case of historic sex abuse is put on is less important as it should be. So, it's no less important. It's just less important than what he's dealing with in that particular time.
Less immediate.
Exactly, less immediate. So, getting your story across and having people believe you, that sense of protection was tremendous. So, this is actually the second show I've been on talking about mental health issues. Today, a little more explicitly. From the last host was a retired pastor. Living in the middle of the States in the Bible Belt kind of area. And I met him at a podcasting event back in January. I went to PodFest, and I met the founders of PodMatch, which is Alex Sanfilippo and Alicia. Yes. So that was very exciting, and I hope to scale my show at some point. It's called Freelancer Training on How to Find More Direct Clients. That's the title of the how-to guide behind me as well. I got a self-published book out last year. So, I'm just having fun with business and trying to get more into consulting, but still living very much as a service provider from my medical knowledge. And I guess my medical knowledge came in handy, Randi-lee, when I diagnosed the woman with BPD. That was a big, and then I very quickly realized that my mother's behavior and patterns were identical. So you can imagine how powerful that was. When my mother died in 2001, I never really had the label. She always used to call the police, and there'd be these frantic calls to police weekly. The police were on my property weekly. I never really understood why until I met the woman with BPD and made that connection. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, when it's hard to describe that kind of feeling. Since she did die, 2001, that's now, 24 years ago? Holy moly, time flies.
24 years in August, coming up.
Yeah, that's a long
Yeah, a
time
long time.
where I can see some people going, well, so long ago, why does it matter? But I also know that it's that aha moment, like, oh, that's why she was that way.
That's it.
It kind of makes things make
Yeah.
sense. And when things make more sense, we're able to process them better and then move forward with more knowledge and better skills.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you've nailed it. It's the penny drops onto what happens. So you see your past in a different light. In my case, in the context of BPD, and that I spent 83% of my time with her. Which is about 310 days of the year. I spent 55 with the other parent, which was nothing. And that's just how the family courts rolled in the early 80s. She was the mother. She got care and control. Didn't matter that she was mentally ill. She just was deceitful on the stand, took control, and that's the way it went down. So, I wouldn't have been much better in the other parents' care, but it's sort of you realize just what kind of dangers you were in, and child endangerment and situations. It's scary. It's scary what could have happened. I mean, I'm lucky. That was a very very incestuous family. I'm lucky I wasn't physically incested, and it didn't go further than some bathroom abuse, once a day for a few years. It could have easily gone much further when I got to my teens. So I'm glad it didn't, obviously. But sometimes wonder, would my life be very different today had that happened? I'm not sure, because the emotional incest thing. Emotional incest is not criminal. It is highly dysfunctional. It is deeply abnormal and very dysfunctional, but it's not criminal. Perhaps it should be. I've suggested it should be, but it's not. It's just parents, who can't, have healthy relationships themselves, bullying, coercing children into being their surrogate partners. And, for a long time, Randi-lee, I would just be treating emotional problems academically. I'm quite a cerebral type of guy. I read a lot, and I was just there sort of with the books under my arm, reading everything on emotional incest, thinking that would solve the problem. But it's an emotional problem, and it's not solved by cramming the books, as you would probably get through med school, which I more or less did. But I'm a big proponent of therapy. There's a wonderful book by Alice Miller called The Body Never Lies. And this idea, I don't know if you've come across that one. It was recommended by a very dear friend of mine. My friend's name is Jim Clay, who had also some issues in his childhood. We're still in touch. And it's basically this idea that emotions are stored in the body, and you can't take the emotions out. And eventually those emotions will come up to the surface. So whether it's through physical or psychological unrest, and that more or less happened to me when those images. My physical abuse was repressed for a very very long time, from 1988 until right at the end of 2013, so 12 years ago. And when they came back, I said, yeah, this is sex abuse, that's reported, and I did on the 6th of January 2014. So I waited days, and I called my therapist. I was in therapy at the time, and she was hammering me a lot more that year about emotional incest and incestuous families, and I was thinking, no, that's not right. That definitely didn't happen. Denial. And until that wall is broken down, and eventually it's difficult to move forwards until you've kind of got through that wall of denial, which is incredibly powerful. You've no idea how powerful that mechanism is, defense mechanism. Very, very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. There's another good book, The Body Speaks the Mind, which is the similar concept. Is you're going to what's stored there, the emotional storage there, is gonna come out through your body.
That's it.
We had to read it when I did my yoga training.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I can't remember who wrote it, but The Body Speaks the Mind.
The Body Speaks the Mind. I just noted that down. That's a good reference. Yeah, mine was Alice Miller, The Body Never Lies, which is a good one. I recommend that to anyone interested in self-help and that kind of book.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one too. That's what triggered me to remember the other one.
Yeah.
So that's excellent. So therapy, also a huge proponent of it. It's helped me immensely, especially with boundaries, which you did
I
mention.
did.
So
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about those because they are very difficult to put out there and be firm with when you have trauma of any type,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And even though in your head, and I'm pulling from my own experience, guys, always, we know how this show goes. When we are in our head, we go, okay, this is my boundary line, but then somebody crosses it, but you don't have the skills to push them back over that line.
Yeah.
No, this is my boundary line. You stay over there. It's very difficult, and therapy taught me a lot about when people trampled that boundary line because, well, they also didn't know it was there because I didn't tell them it was there, right? So it's a very difficult thing. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that and get your take on how maybe you've been able to develop your boundaries or how you can articulate them, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. Boundaries are so important both at work and in life, I think. And so bear in mind the context. I mean, I was born into an incestuous family with no boundaries. So there were no boundaries. The boundaries were very, very blurred
Exactly.
between.
You had to figure them out
I
later.
had to figure them out later. So my boundaries were, I had one parent, grooming me to go and take the other parent out to dinner and instructions on the money. So that's a serious violation of a boundary of my rights. I was 8 when that instruction was written. So September 1983. That is a calculated, strategic, exploitative maneuver by an APD. That's not impulsivity. BPD is impulsive. So my mother was impulsive. The other parent that was a calculated move to gain something in return. So that's when my relationship with that person ended, really. I would go on to see that person for another 29 years until August 2012, and he's still alive. Um, but that's effectively when that relationship ended. So yeah, I mean boundaries. It's just very difficult. I'd like to say that my awareness of this topic is so big now that it is better. I sort of beat myself up about this, thinking it's still a problem. It is better because I do enforce and try to respect people's boundaries more than I have done in the past. With me, bear in mind, it would just always be with the older women dynamic, and I'll turn 50 at the end of July, so I'm just coming out of my 40s. I would tell you probably until my early 40s, I was this dynamic, very abnormal dynamic, was causing me difficulties, emotional pain, because of my upbringing, living with the BPD so closely for 10 years. So I think it's something I'm much better applying it at work because I'm a bit of a geek and I consider myself a high performer at work. I think that's fair, even if I do say, it's not to brag, but I do perform rather highly at work and I'm very more clearer about the boundaries at work than I am in life. And that's an interesting, just always very academic. Part of my abuse growing up was just turning me into a doctor, something I didn't want to do. I was very good at languages and music growing up, pretty good at maths, but natural sciences I was average to poor. I mean, I would get average grades. I didn't have any natural flair whatsoever. Nonetheless, BPD mother wanted me to be a doctor, and there was no choice, absolutely no choice. I would have had to have just lied and gone ahead with applications against that, pushed back on that, and I ended up in a position where I applied to Oxford to do medicine for entry in September 1993. So that was pretty good, coming from a very average natural science background to applying to Oxford and doing maths and chemistry papers. I didn't get in, but I did go to Bristol to study medicine, which is a very good university. A lot of Oxbridge rejects do go to Bristol. And I studied there from 1993 to 1997, so right up until year 4 of medicine. So I think, to answer your question, boundaries, it's a work in progress. You never really, and I think relationships and marriages and are constant work, as you know. You're married yourself, so you will know this. And you do have to enforce your boundaries because you will inevitably have a boundary challenge. Even the healthiest of people get their boundaries challenged. So if you've come from an environment of narcissistic abuse, as I did, and physical abuse as well, it's just so much harder. But I would say that's counteracted. It's sort of like the eyesight thing. I'm short-sighted, but as I get older, the long-sighted stuff that I'm dealing with now, I need some bifocals like yesterday because I just can't see anything reading. I'm just like bringing the thing up to my face like this.
Yeah, I take my glasses off to read, and then I put them back.
It's just crazy. So it's almost like age tempers a lot of problems. Does it temper? It's just an idea that's come to me now, thinking about your question. But it's possible that there is a beneficial effect of age on emotional maturity, and BPD people are extremely emotionally immature people. The woman I met was 41 at the time. She'll be 42 now. Probably her emotional age, I'll say 5, maybe 6, and that's being generous. So these are emotionally stunted people. My mother is exactly the same. When I took I went to Boston in summer '95. When I took the coach from Digbeth Station in Birmingham down to Heathrow, she just burst into tears with this abnormal, emotional reaction. I remember just starting and just shifting in my seat. I was just so surprised, and I made a gesture that I'd call her that evening, which I did. But it's incredible the effects of trauma on BPD is, if you've looked into it, it is actually a physiological thing. It is the amygdala morphologically changing because of repeated exposure to cortisol. So the trauma hormone is cortisol. When that's released, somehow the amygdala, which sits in the frontal cortex of the brain and is responsible for emotions and decision making. So these people's amygdala, these patients have their decision centers shot to pieces, which is why they're calling the police so often. The slightest heightened emotional reaction or conflicts, they'll reach for the phone, call the police. A BPD patient's best friend is the phone. And my mother used to call the police weekly because of disputes of neighbors, and she just wouldn't get on with anybody. I didn't realize, or I realized much later than perhaps close friends, that she was mentally ill. I've no idea if her neighbors realized. They must have thought something was up, because it's not normal to call the police to solve a neighbor dispute or someone parking a car where you think it shouldn't be parked. So it's a fascinating disease or illness or challenge, call it what you want. The reference texts are, there's one called Walking on Eggshells, because that's how you feel around a BPD, walking on eggshells. That's you're familiar with that one. And the other one is called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, which is a reference to the push-pull. They'll push you away, but at the same time, they're craving emotional connection. They don't realize that they're treating you so poorly, you kind of have to leave just to protect your sanity. And it is hard to leave because, these invariably are very attractive, seductive people. I mean, my mother was certainly very good looking physically. So I can imagine the draw that she had on men, or particularly on my father, and just how difficult a challenge that is. And certainly the woman I met was very, very similar. So that was probably the biggest boundary challenge I had. She wanted to hang on to me after a few hours, and I found it difficult to go and spend some time on my own, just to close out the meeting, and that was tough. But that wasn't the BPD person saying I want to spend time with Jason. That's I don't want to be alone. That's fear of abandonment. So and that's no reason to spend time with anybody. So it's a very tricky illness. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any one, I mean, this is going to be a very hard question to answer, but is there any one thing that you learned in therapy that you think would be the thing to share right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for me, personally, from my experience, it was how to tackle negative emotions. Because I would be sat at my desk as I am now, looking at the screen, and I'd be overcome by negative emotion, and I would just try and banish it. I'd just try and swat it away like a fly or a bee or something annoying, and it would just sort of be a knot in my throat, And what I learned was that, hey, you can actually stand up and you can walk around the room. You can go outside, walk around the block. You can grab a cushion and sort of pummel the cushion with your hands. I just learned techniques, or a baseball bat if you have one, or a tennis racket or whatever. I just learned techniques to handle negative emotion by this therapist called Jose, whose website was Discover Your Truth in Spanish, descubretuverdad.com. And I always used to say, you are the el mago de las emociones. You're the emotions wizard. That's what I used to call him, the emotions wizard.
I like that.
And if he taught me anything, it was techniques to manage my emotions and just get away from the books and read. You can see I read about these things, and I can cite all the texts and papers and stuff like that. That's not the solution. The solution is really getting confident with your emotions. And I'm someone who rocked up at third year med school, age 20. I probably had the emotional age of a 15-year-old, maybe less, maybe 12, because I'd been held back. I wasn't, I didn't cross a road until I was 15, 16. There was a lot of coercion going on, and we have laws on coercion in my country, in the UK. I don't know about the US or Canada, but there are coercion laws in the UK, and the police sort of, oh really, was there coercion? And I was having people coercing me to, bribing me to buy me things if I behaved in a way that would make their lives easier. That is coercion. That is illegal, and somebody could be charged if they engage in coercive activities. So for me, it was just gaining a handle on the techniques to handle my emotions, and that's thanks to this therapist. I worked with quite a few therapists. This guy in particular was very wise emotionally. He was just very, very clued up, and I always used to look up to him and think, wow, this is just incredible.
That is the perfect answer. I thought it would be so much trickier of a question. But that was fantastic. Because, when you're like, you could just get up, I'm like, I've never thought about that before. Like, how silly am I?
Yeah.
That I'm feeling bad or whatever, because I get depression and up and downs or whatever, and I could just get up and go outside.
Yeah, just get up.
I mean, it's not going to solve my whole life, but it's going to help me in that one moment. I could just get up and go outside, unless it's snowing, then I'm not going. But it's nice today, so I could just get up and go outside.
Yeah, just the aerating your brain, giving your brain oxygen is having a beneficial effects. Just putting a break, and whenever you got that negative emotion is having a, or you get the cushion and you punch the cushion like, isn't there a film with Billy Crystal where he's seeing a psychiatrist and he shoots at the cushion or something? He does something with Robert De Niro, who I think is his shrink, and or Robert De Niro's the patient and Billy Crystal's the shrink. And he just shoots the cushion with it. It's that kind of thing. It's this physicality of just hitting the cushion with your hands or a baseball bat or something. And in group therapy, there was a lot of baseball bats around, and you could whack someone's head off with one of these things if you really wanted to do someone harm. So it was a very controlled environment, a soundproof room, and I remember one of the girls feeling, her name was Christina, and she expressed almost fear at the strength of I didn't feel that I was any stronger than anyone else. It just caught my eye that Christina was saying, wow, Jason's got a lot of strength and a lot of emotion there coming out. And I thought, wow, if this is misguided, you can really do some serious damage in this thing. So there was six women and 4 men, and I remember the girls were so much more emotional with their emotionality, which is as you'd expect, and the men was sort of all stiff upper lip type of thing. That's just our education. My generation, we were educated really to bottle up emotions and certainly not talk about your feelings or anything negative. That was just, 1980s UK for you. I have no idea about North America, but, I'm guessing why would it be any different? So that was the kind of upbringing I had. I guess it comes down to personal accountability, Randi-lee. You just have to say, well, I want to be a better person and do some work on myself. And then if you do that and invest in yourself, and mental health is as good an investment as you can get. I mean, I invest in my business.
Yes.
I'm not afraid to invest in therapists and people that can help me, and it's great. Talking to this is very therapeutic. Just talking to you on this
Right?
podcast.
That's why I love talking to
Yeah,
everybody, right? Because I find this is just like my coping strategy right
exactly.
here. Yep. Awesome. So, uh, tell us about what are you promoting? I know you got your book back there that you said you just published last year.
I did. I
Get that right.
self-published a how-to guide. It's called How to Find More Direct Clients. That's a reference to most people in my industry starting or wanting to run away from agencies and middlemen to find their own clients, and that's better working conditions, shorter payment cycles, that kind of thing. So I help freelancers scale up, and I'm also getting into the linguistic validation space. So anyone who's interested in online language service provision, get in touch. My website is Entrepreneurial Translator, entrepreneurialtranslator.com, and that's my hybrid business. I'm very interested in the bridge between human and machine customer service. You can't teach. People still buy from people, and it's
Yeah.
all about business relationships. I mean, I've met you today online, and if you saw my name, you'd connected with this conversation, and we have a relationship
Exactly.
after today, right? So that's something the machine can't do for you. You can only go so far with automation and systems, and that's important
Mm-hmm.
for reaching people at scale. But ultimately, it is down to a P2P selling strategy, and people buy from people. I go to events. I put the time in to build those relationships. I de-virtualize people I want to meet. I've met online who I want to meet in person, and I'm having a great time in my career. I'm entering my 50s in a few months, and I'm surviving in an industry where a lot of people are having difficulty because I've
Mm-hmm.
learnt how to generate interest in my service and products. That's something I'm just
Awesome.
pretty good at networking and being an introvert. I'm very very shy, very introvert. I'd have difficulty speaking on a stage to a large room, but I can just get over it. I can just imagine I'm singing in the shower or something, or just talking to myself or my family, and yeah, it's a great. I'm enjoying life at the moment. So there is adversity. I think success is sweeter if you have had an adverse childhood. If you've come from adversity, I think your success I'm tremendously admiring of successful people. It has nothing to do with academic prowess, or it's just people know how to make money. There's a lot of people, clever people, who don't know how to sell themselves,
Yeah.
and they're poor, and they have this scarcity mindset, and that's sad. So I love helping people, just passing on. I've been working on myself in a business sense for about 3 years now, and I picked up quite a
Okay.
few tricks, and I like
Yeah.
to pass those tricks on to someone else.
Yeah, I like that. Where would they pick up that book?
So they can get that on the website, entrepreneurialtranslator.com/books, or I'm on Amazon. If you just type in how to find direct clients, Jason Willis-Lee, that'll come up, and you can buy an ebook, you can buy a paperback, or you can even splash out and buy a hardback. So
As always, thank
yeah.
Whoops. That didn't mean to go on. Awesome. And where do people follow you?
So the best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's an easy place. Or I'm also on Instagram. So I'm building audience on LinkedIn and Instagram. I've seen Substack. I've seen quite a few big names on Substack now, and I've
Yes.
sort of dipped into it. But I think I'm still at a stage where I need a mainstream platform like LinkedIn or Instagram. So please connect and say hi if you see me on this episode with you.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly.